Alright, time for another DraftPhysics.com, DebatePhysics.com, also video presentation. Comments. A few days worth, haven't, not much rolling in. Yeah. So anyway, so this person asks, what's your opinion on Google's quantum chip breakthrough? So they found a way to make the clock speed insanely high. But it doesn't, the rest of the chip can't run at that speed, so it doesn't make any difference. What's your opinion generally regarding quantum computation? So the fact that this, whatever you call it, $1 billion computer still can't, render an image. It still can't add 2 plus 2. Surely, so somebody replies, surely would be that some associated claim regarding its implications to technical physics, theoretical physics, are exaggerated, overblown, or unsubstantiated. Yeah, of course, that will be my claim, that it's bullshit, and they won't show you anything. You're never going to see it do anything. And, if I made $1 billion car that had 17 different ways of running, and so none of the motors really, the quantum motors didn't work, but, the electric motor could still make it run. This is not going to be a thing, okay? This theoretical qubit stuff is based on an insanely wrong premise about how reality works. There is no such thing as entanglement, and it was always, a fable, and I didn't ask to do any of this. Yeah, no, that's not what I asked to do. I said remove, I thought. Okay, that's all I want to do. It's not a very interesting subject anyway, so I'll play a little Sabine Hossenfelder because she has a video sort of, almost, kind of, a little tiny bit on the subject. In the sense that they're also claiming that this is also verification of some many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, and they're going to prove the existence of the multiverse with this computer, and none of that is ever going to happen, and all of this is hype. As she pointed out in a video about 3 months ago, she did a video where she basically debunked the whole quantum industry of quantum computing, in the sense that all of the companies can't produce anything of use. None of it has any value. They've invested millions of dollars, billions even, and all the investors are going to lose all their money. And so every single company went public, and to get suckers to, pay the bill so the people who finance this nonsense can get out of it rich. So it's just a racket. All of these people who are investing their money will not get any return. They're going to lose their money because it's a non-industry. These computers have no pragmatic, practical value. They won't do anything that somebody's going to pay them to do, okay? Because they're not going to do anything useful. And the only people going to have any use for them, even if such a thing were possible, are people doing preposterous calculations that aren't, they aren't going to build bridges. They aren't going to do anything. They're just theoretical nonsense calculations. So the whole thing's a waste of money. Simply put, it's an insane waste of money. And it's all premised on lies. Lies about what the double slit experiment proves and shows. So let's play that bit.
We can't just do away with superpositions because without them, the results of our calculations don't agree with observations.
So the big joke is their calculations are so far off of reality, and they've so misunderstood the actual phenomenon, that they have to create all this fake bent space to make their fake calculations fit.
The best known example is the double slit experiment.
Right, which is completely not what they describe. So I've showed it in the other video. I have found a semi-easy way to illustrate the lie of it all. So this is...
which requires that any one particle goes through both slits. It's only then that a pattern which builds up from
So we know this isn't the pattern, okay, of the double slit pattern in light. Not even close. So we know it's just an insanely false and fake and phony description of the reality. So I can draw the reality here. That we know the real double slit pattern will look something like this. I believe this will show properly. Yeah, that's just not terrible. So you have two patterns. You have one that looks something like this. Okay, and one that's the little dots. Okay, so there's two patterns, and there's obvious features like this double maxima that doesn't show up in water and all of these stuff, these points you can make, that they have no explanation for this actual pattern. Their math doesn't predict this actual pattern. So what they, what they do to fake the experiment and force it to look like water is they take single slit experiment, a slit experiment, and they basically crank it down until, frankly, there's no pattern, no fringes. Okay, so these two surfaces are so close together, and that's the surfaces are causing the phenomenon. The wave that comes out, just there's no two waves, right? It's a single slit experiment. But we know the single slit does create fringe patterns because there's two surfaces and they have a distance between them, and that's the actual math. The actual math is the distance from these two surfaces creates the geometry for the in phase and out of phase. The surfaces, key factor. And what they do is they basically say, well, let's do a double slit with two slits that aren't open so that these 2 points disappear. So it's only two sources. So a few photons get out of this one, a few photons get out of this one, and now you have a single slit fringe pattern. Like this, the crude thing in their drawing there. That's a single slit pattern. It's not a double slit pattern, right? And so that's the canard. If they do this with light, they get that pattern. Okay. And so that's the big lie. It really is a surface experiment. There are no round waves coming out of the opening. There are right here and right here. There's 2 point sources creating bits of energy at a frequency, and the simple fact is because of the distance difference, the frequency is in phase or out of phase at locations. 50-50 chance. In phase, out of phase. Going in phase, going out of phase, if you want to put it that way. And that's all there is. So all this whole superposition, entanglement crap, the photon entangles or interferes with itself. None of that crap happens. It's all a fable. And it's a provable fable in the sense that they have no explanation for the actual pattern. None. All right, I'll just finish the rest of this video and say, yeah, that's it. I mean, I have gone into detail. If you go to debate physics, there's double slit experiments there. Draft physics, there's photon experiments there, where I explain in more detail all the flaws in how they've interpreted this very simple experiment and completely perverted it.
Visual particles on the screen can show interference. David thinks that this is already evidence for parallel universes.
So there is no interference. It's also explained by the antenna experiment. So I can put 2 source antennas separated from each other, and then I can put a collecting antenna in between the 2 sources. So the sources are producing exactly the same signal, and I can just change it and make it go in phase and out of phase, and I can create the same interference pattern even though the 2 sources can't possibly be interfering with each other. So it's just all crap. Junk science, a fable, mysticism. It's not good science. It's feeble, trivial analysis of the phenomenon, and it's frankly gotten to the point of just being insanely dishonest. All right, probably enough of that. So back to, I guess we can get rid of this, but don't play any more video. All right, so the other comment. Let's see here. What is energy? Replied, smartest person, blah blah. All right, so some asshole says, yeah. Um, if I can make extra momentum in a direction, that means I can do more work in that direction. So that's the most obvious thing you could possibly say. I mean, anybody disagreeing with that is just too far gone in terms of being a religious nut. It's just so obvious that momentum has the power to do work. And if I increase something's momentum, I am increasing its power to do work. And he says, no, it doesn't. I mean, there's no point in us conversing because you have zero evidence that more momentum doesn't do more work. Okay, and less momentum does less work. All right, momentum does not tell you anything about how much work you can do. So it's just a lie. It's insipid. It's so stupid. You have zero evidence. I mean, zero evidence to make any statement that momentum doesn't always do. It doesn't always obey Newton's laws. And it is the definition of work, frankly. Objects with large momentum take more time to stop when they apply the force opposing their motion. So that's more just nonsense. I mean, obviously, fast bullets don't take more time to stop. Lots of things can be, the energy can be absorbed over big surfaces, small surfaces, all kinds of details decide how the momentum is absorbed, even the simple rolling argument. So maybe I'll do some of that. Shows that you can change how much friction there is. You can change how much time it takes to remove something's energy, absorb its energy, transfer its energy. All you can do is transfer momentum. That's all that happens in this universe, and you don't have a single real credible experiment showing that anything else is true. But momentum will tell you how far they will travel. So again, far doesn't make any difference whatsoever. Far has nothing to do with it in terms of collecting energy. So again, I can show you the experiments where it's decisive. If you collect the energy linearly and fairly, how far they go will be completely consistent with how much energy they have, and it's only by cheating, okay, that you change that equation. Fast things do in fact have less contact with surfaces and do in fact lose less energy. Anyway, how far they would travel against the opposing force. So again, generally speaking, it's not about an opposing force, it's about a drain. It's about something that will accept the energy and move. It takes it. You need kinetic energy to do that. So it's just a lie. There's nothing. There's no friggin' experimental evidence. It's just simple math. No, it's simple nonsense. You have no frickin' evidence. Okay. And to answer your question nobody ever answers. That won't happen. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure both kinetic energy and momentum were used in moon landing calculations. So you're just making that up. Frankly, they had very limited space on the computer. Okay. We're talking about 1969. Computers weren't nothing like they are now. And they wouldn't have wasted the space, frankly. They could only hold like 300 formulas in the computer. I mean, it's a very tight amount of space they had, very, very limited. And you wouldn't waste, any of the computer's capacity on a formula you have no use for. Because they are both important. No, they're not. They mean completely different things. Yeah, one of them's real and one of them's unreal. One of them's absolute nonsense, never does any work ever. Okay, and every experiment proves it. And the other one always works and is always conserved. All right, lighter bowling balls are not supposed to have more energy, so that's a lie. Your theory says they do. They overtly calculate to have more energy. So just lie some more. Unless you put more energy into them. We're talking about, I explicitly say it's an 8-pound ball going 16 miles an hour and a 16-pound ball going 8 miles an hour. That's the argument. Your theory says the one has twice as much energy. And I'm certainly going to argue that a grown adult, okay, is going to be able to throw something half the weight, twice the speed. No problem. Lighter objects don't magically have more energy. Yeah, they do. Okay, there's nothing, again, you have zero evidence that, 5 times the velocity is 25 times the impact energy. Zero evidence. Okay, not a single piece of experimental evidence, and certainly no evidence that takes 25 times the work to make something go 5 times as fast. No turbine proves it, no jet engine proves it, nothing. There's not anything on this planet that demonstrates that crap to be the truth. You liar. Okay, ballistic pendulums are very inelastic by design. They're supposed to be collecting the energy, so of course they don't reflect it. Duh! Jeez. It's not their job to conserve kinetic. It's their job to collect it. That's exactly what they're designed to do. So how would you design one? You're saying nothing can collect the energy, right? We're trying to collect it. We're trying to show it exists. And you're saying we can't make anything that can absorb the kinetic energy. No physical device can absorb the kinetic energy. We must lose 99.94% of the kinetic energy. Must. None of our land on the moon technical prowess can invent a device that actually collects the kinetic energy. That's your argument, moron. And of course it's weak and silly and mockable. All right, large momentum wins the tug of war. Everyone agrees. Well, then you are agreeing with the point that momentum is real and the kinetic energy is nonsense. So you've just proven my goddamn point. I can't believe it. He says it. Larger momentum wins the tug of war. Well, what do you think the tug of war is? It's a contest of power. It's a contest of energy. It's nothing else but that. And you're conceding kinetic energy won't do you any good. Yeah, that you need to have momentum to win. Oh, miraculously bizarre. All right, I don't know if I'll read. Superior Mind always sort of says something that isn't exactly what I would say. Anyway, he said, objects with large momentum take more time to stop when you apply force opposing the motion. Applying more force due to more momentum, force stored in mass, means more work and potential to do something because it has more force in it. Well, the simple argument is there's absolutely not a single bit of evidence that more momentum doesn't do more work. More water, more anything. Every time I increase the mass and keep the velocity the same, I'm going to do more work. And any time I keep the mass the same and increase the velocity, I'm going to do more work. How is it even possible that this isn't extremely obvious to anyone? Well, they don't care, and the fact that it's not obvious is because they haven't produced any of these experiments. There are no car crashes, there are no dropping, there are no anything, there are no tug of wars. Also, kinetic energy was not used in the moon landing. That was done manually. Well, that's not the point. We're just talking about the amount of thrust. And we're saying you can calculate thrust two ways. The calculation of its kinetic energy, how much mass is moving what speed. So you're missing the point, sort of. It doesn't matter whether it's done by the computer or done manually. The point is, if you calculate it, which one calculates correctly? And obviously momentum obeys Newton's third law, so momentum wins as being insanely useful. Kinetic energy doesn't obey the third law, so therefore incredibly unuseful. All right. So that's enough of that. So I'll go over a couple of observations. Contextual statements regarding what we sort of have learned through this process that I shouldn't have to just keep doing this over and over again, because there are facts here that have been acquired that change one's perspective on the experiments people are using to make arguments. So going all the way back now, maybe even 3 years ago. All right, so in this argument, the Brozo did an experiment that was accidentally, I'll say, quite well done, in the sense that he created a lever, and the simple mechanism was this spring was going to create the power, and all you do is swing the arm out, and then allow the arm to swing in. And the simple truth is that this mechanism, no matter what, as long as I put the weights in the right location that is proportional to the mass, I will create a mechanism that is linear in how much energy the lever absorbs. So it'll be fair to both objects. So this object will move 1/2 the speed, okay, and this one will go 1 velocity. This one's a half mass, and the simple truth is it will guarantee the 2 to 1 relationship, and it will guarantee that the lever, all of these things, the spring, the lever, will all move in exactly the same speed in both experiments, meaning they'll absorb exactly the same amount of energy. They'll have exactly the same friction points and all the rest of it. So I won't have changed the dynamic of the spring or the lever, and I can do the experiment, all right, and it perfectly works in the sense that this will go twice as fast as this will go, and so I'll get reliable velocities. Now the simple argument is if I do this and then launch the objects off of a cliff, okay, I'm going to guarantee the result, which will be, 2 to 1. All right, the thing going twice as fast is going to go twice as far, not 4 times as far. So I've taken, the unevenness of pulling the energy out with friction, and just as a measure, it just comes out clearly that, the amount of energy is clearly just a function of the velocity and the mass, and that's all you're going to get, and you can't change that truth. Twice the velocity is, you get if you lower the mass by a half or you lower the force. So the force is the same, you're just applying it in 2 different velocities, and that's it. So they both have the same capacity to do work because they both have the same momentum, the same MV. And again, you have this circumstance where you're claiming this one has twice as much energy, the lighter object going faster, and it doesn't. It won't do twice as much work, and just a fact. All right, so I could probably extend that, but we'll see what the other point is. All right, so just for clarification, there's a ton of experiments out there where they measure energy by launching 2 things, okay, with a spring without using that lever to guarantee the velocities are correct, because the spring by itself will move at a different velocity and there will be a different amount of energy put into the object. It won't be twice as much or half as much. So you really do need a device to control, okay, what you're going to get out of the spring, because if the spring is on its own devices, as I've pointed out, the spring doesn't give all of its energy away to a faster object. The faster the object leaves, the more energy is still stuck in the spring. Okay, fact. Okay, and then they'll do an experiment where they'll put some object here to be hit, after the projectile has traveled a long distance across a frictional surface. And clearly that, again, can be easily detected that, frankly, the friction is being controlled by gravity. Gravity is creating the contact. And the fact is that in a case where you have something with 1 velocity, it will travel this tiny amount of distance, and something with just twice the velocity will travel 4 times that distance. And it's only because it's going to be going half its speed here, not in the middle, okay, because this friction here will be much lower than the friction here, because speed matters when it comes to friction. More contact. You have to have bigger the contact, the more energy you can push into another object. So it's just like electricity. The better your electrical contact, the more wattage you can pump through that contact point. And the weaker the contact, the less wattage you can pump through. And so the faster something goes across the surface, the less it's going to be making contact if gravity's creating the friction. And so it's just a fact. And so every experiment where they do some test in some place here, for example, it's completely unfair because obviously one object is almost lost all of its energy. You know, it's at it's only got 10% left at this location, and the other object still has 50% of its energy. So it's hardly a fair contest to measure here. Well, you can't see that. Yeah, so that's no point. I can fix that, I guess. Redraw it. So, I mean, there's a ton of experiments out there where they literally make this mistake, where they have something and they're going to measure the location. And the fact is the one object is running out of energy faster than the other one is because of the speed. And so the one object has lost, say, 90% of its energy has been given to friction, and the other one has only lost 20% of its energy. One of them would go this far. One of them was only going to go this far. So obviously, you know, one of them is almost out of energy. The other one still has plenty left. And that's the fraud. You can't do experiments like that and interpret them that way, like this is somehow a fair fight. It's like you had two boxers, and you know, one of them you had a fist fight with in the back room before the fight, you know, a 5-minute fight, and the other one didn't. You know, so one of them's tired, worn out, the other one isn't, and then you said, okay, let's see who's stronger. It's, you know, it's completely bullshit. And there's a ton of experiments that do this, where they shoot objects and say, look, it's going twice as fast, and they hit something a meter away. And it's just completely unfair because obviously the lighter, faster object is going to go 4 times the distance. So at any point I draw a line, the one object has lost a lot of energy compared to the other one. So this crime has been committed by a lot of these people. This bar especially, he's done probably 4 or 5 experiments where he doesn't account for this fact, okay, and shows us pretty much junk results that aren't have anything to do with reality, and claims they prove something, and it's junk. All right. Now, is that enough? Well, I'll pause. I know I thought there was some other little thing I wanted to throw in. No, I guess that's it. Merry Bugmas, because that's all you people really are. You really haven't done any better. You know, you physically can't do any better than just being bugs. And you haven't intellectually done any better than just being reactionary, bigoted, nepotistic, completely psychologically controlled bugs. Okay, the truth doesn't matter, logic doesn't matter. It's just devotion to your fables and nonsense, your mysticism, your woo, your silly crap. And yeah, so still dumb as a bug. Sadly, all these neurons just wasted on, you know, bugology, bugological, all that kind of stuff. So, till the next time and such. Yeah.